This reaping of the whirlwind. A revival preacher, a true Job's comforter, proclaims that the drought is a direct punishment for our sins. The future promises only hopeless and permanent desert conditions. Special prayers for rain were offered at our county seat last Sunday morning. The afternoon brought one of the most sudden, dense, and suffocating death storms of the season.
By 1935, Caroline Henderson and her neighbors needed all the help they could find. Like everyone else in the United States, they were suffering as the greatest economic cataclysm in the nation's history, the Great Depression, lingered on. But they were also caught in the midst of the nation's greatest ecological catastrophe, where black blizzards blotted out the sun, created drifts against their homes, ruined their crops, choked their livestock, and took the lives of their children. And just when it seemed things could not get any worse, on Sunday, April 14th, 1935, the biggest storm of all had struck with a surprising vengeance.
I think it really scared a lot of people. It's also scary enough that it gets the attention of the rest of the country. If people weren't paying attention prior to Black Sunday, this is an event that is so monumental that people can't ignore it.
In the Dust Bowl, the survivors of Black Sunday worried that they had become a forgotten people in a forgotten land. They weren't forgotten. While President Franklin Roosevelt struggled to get the whole country back on its feet, he was also profoundly concerned about the fate of the Southern Plains. But over the next few years, the drought would only deepen, and the black blizzards that added immeasurably to people's miseries would only intensify. Many would fight desperately to hold on to their land and their lives. Others would be forced to join an exodus toward a promised land that offered both water and work. In the crucible of dust and drought and depression, some families would be torn apart, others uprooted from their homes, and some brought closer together than ever before.
Well, I think to be a dry land farmer, you have to be a certain kind of a person. And deep down inside of themselves, they must have had the feeling, if we just stick it out and stay here, times are bound to get better. Which did give them a little hope, but in the middle of a dust storm, it's very difficult to hope. And it takes a lot of willpower and everything else to bring yourself back out time after time after time. So you had to admire those people who did stick it out. They had come there, maybe they'd been born there, and they intended to stay. This was their home.
We lived in a brown world. The land was barren and brown. It seemed like most of the houses were weather-beaten. In my life, it was a brown world. The ground was brown, everything was brown, and I didn't know any difference. It was all I knew.
During the 1930s, 46 of the 48 states had experienced some form of drought, and farmers everywhere were hurting. But none more than those in the area surrounding the town of Boise City, Oklahoma, which the federal government had declared as the geographic center of the Dust Bowl, where conditions were the worst, a place once known as No Man's Land. In 1935, Boise City received fewer than 10 inches of precipitation, the official definition of a desert. Farmers in nearby Baca County, Colorado, who had once harvested wheat on 237,000 acres, now had successful crops on only 516. In the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles, the absentee suitcase farmers, who had hoped to strike it rich in wheat, simply abandoned nearly 4 million acres of exposed fields, leaving them to blow with each new wind. In southwestern Kansas, vegetable gardens were producing 90% less than normal, and more than a quarter of the children were reported to be at least 10% underweight. People here have given up trying to be civilized, a local minister said. We are merely trying to exist.
We had a little heifer that had a new calf, and I went down to see the calf, and it was laying there kicking, and my dad was walking away with a hammer. He had killed it, and I ran to my mother, and I just bawling about it because my dad was so tender-hearted. And she said he had to. She said, we just got the one milk down, and she said there's not enough milk for you kids and the calf too. And she said you kids have got to have milk. So killed the calf.
Well, it was pretty bad. My mother saved sugar sacks and flour sacks for material to make my panties, and I had a dress made out of flour sacks. It wasn't good for cow, it was just cotton that had been printed like little flowers on the sugar sacks. And that's why they were used for my panties. And the flour sacks might be plaid or have big flowers, and that's why they made dresses out of them.
Mother could get us a dress out of 3 feed sacks. They made them real pretty prints because they found out the farmers' wives were using them for that. We found out some of the neighbors wore the same dresses we did, but we always laughed at each other and went on because we had a new dress. It was fine.
My family, in terms of eating, could have eggs, our own eggs.